Hello, BookTube, and I think, well, this is going to be a more or less sort of a brief update and then a TBR for November, I think. Um, I have, I'm beginning to, I think, crawl out of my sort of long COVID black hole that's been happening recently with resting and brain fog or cognitive issues. They're still there. They're still breathing difficulty issues, but I'm I think I'm getting a better rest now, so that all around helps. I'm still having difficulty breathing laying down, which had gone away for the better part of a year with only little bits and pieces in between, but it's quite sustained now. And I think I'm going to try to get there's something called a pillow wedge or something like that. So it's a great big sort of triangle thing of foam. So I'll be laying sort of like this, so it keeps my head up. And because I notice when I'm laying sort of on my side and quite flat, that all of a sudden I can't. It seems like I'm not getting any oxygen in, and then my body starts panicking. And but then if I lift myself up a bit, I can then begin to breathe a little better. So I'm hoping this will sort of be a fix in the short term for things. Um, but anyway, yeah. So but this last week of October is sort of just trying to clear up a couple things, and again, I'm gonna have to drop things. Um, like well, there's many things that I was supposed to read, and I'll see if I can start picking up a few of them later. But I kind of doubt that will happen in the short term. But I'm still need to finish reading Sense and Sensibility, um, and that's a hard go for me at the moment because I'm just not enjoying it whatsoever. But I'm determined to finish it because it is fairly short. Also, too, very shortly, I have to finish up either today or tomorrow the Down and Out in Paris in London by George Orwell. It's for my book club, Faded Pages book club, that's on my Patreon. If you are interested, you can. There's a link for the Patreon, and you can look at what each category is if you're interested there. So yeah, so I'm not pushing myself for this last week. But if I do get done those things, then there's a few other things that I'll do. Maybe some short stories or something like that. But you've seen announcements that I've made for uh, New World's November and Hell for the Holidays, which both kick off on November 1st. New World's November is solely just for November, and I'll link the videos, my announcement videos, down below as well for those two. But it's New World's November is a celebration of short stories or short form science fiction, and we have prompts for every week and a bunch of um, shorter prompts. Now, I'm going to try to get as many prompts in, but I've been kind of struggling with the TBR for some reason, because there's certain things that I want to do, and I'm having difficulty finding specific books or stories for it, more specific stories. I all the big anthologies that I had are now like I cleaned up around here and I moved stuff in. It's in preparation of a bigger sort of culling and reorganization of sort of to my side here, this whole section, where all my I want to have all my sort of books about books, and then my books about science fiction, that type of thing on these shelves here, so I can access everything, and also a section for my sort of hardcover or bigger anthologies of science fiction and some hardcover science fiction. So in preparation for that, to clear up space here, I moved it into another part here on the other side of these bookcases, and just, they're stacked on the floor in preparation for this. And I didn't actually think about preparing this properly, because I don't know where anything is now. See, when I had most of it around here within arm's reach, I knew where most of the things were. So that was a oops situation, and I'm not at this point going to dig through those piles until I'm ready for this. So I'm limited to a few other things to go through, and I've still got access to all those uh, um, vintage science fiction books that were gifted to me. But also too, I've got a lot of the science fiction magazines, and but I've got some. These are just three that I pulled out that I'll seriously take a look at. They're all ones, I think, yeah, but I've not had one of these editions before, but all books that I've had before, and probably read for the most part everything that's in it in one form or another. And an anthology. This is it's an ace book. It is World's Best Science Fiction 1966, The Year's Finest Tales of Wonder by Arthur C. Clarke, Fritz Leiber, Clifford D. Simak, Ron Goulart, James H. Schmidt, and it says, and more. Harlan Ellison has got Repent, Harlequin Said, The Tick-Tock Man. Great story. The Decision Makers, Joseph Green. Traveler's Rest, David I. Mason, and goes on. The For those who want to know, the Clifford Simak story is Over the River and Through the Woods. It's a very short story. It's kind of a time travel story. So, I'm going to add some Simak in as we go along. And this one here, which is I really like this one. 7 Trips Through Time and Space, edited by Groff Conklin. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't have this edition. It's a bit of a wet blanket cover to a certain extent. It's a Fawcett gold medal book. And it's got Flatlander by Larry Niven, The Crime and the Glory of Commander Sudzel by Cordwainer Smith, Overproof, Jonathan Blake Mackenzie, Poor Planet, J.T. McIntosh, and I'd spoken about him in another video. I think it's a pseudonym for, well, it's a Scottish writer. And then we got Shamar's War by Chris Neville, The Tactful Saboteur by Frank Herbert, and Ministry of Disturbance by H. Beam Piper. I remember liking Ministry of Disturbance, and that might be part of a series as well. So I've got some things there to dip into, and then there's this hardcover one, the British edition, in this format. I forget what the format is of the book, because they're taller than they are narrow, and more narrow than American versions. This is the World's Best Short Stories #1, editor Donald A. Wollheim, and it's got a neat cover on it, jacket. It's a bit rough. It's got it's spotting on it, foxing. Let's see who's in here. We've got Robert Sheckley, R.A. Lafferty, Frederick Pohl, and Jack Williamson. Oh, Doomship, that's pretty good. I think that was expanded into a novel. It's a novelette, but I seem to think that, unless it was Doomship and Other Stories or something like that, or they just published it separately in big print. Norbert Spinrad, Weed of Time. A Modest Genius, Vladimir Shefner, or Vadim Shefner. Don't remember that. It says English translation, so that may be something that I have not read. The Deathbird by Harlan Ellison, E.C. Tubb, Gordon Eklund, Michael Bishop, and obviously Clifford D. Simak with Construction Shack. So there's quite a bit in there to these three to sort of delve into. And the first week is terrestrial, and I'm building my TBR at the moment for terrestrial, and I'm trying to get things that are what I'm really trying to do is to do archaeology in a lot of the stories. Now, there's a lot of science fiction that says archaeology, but they're just sort of, there's ruins in it or something like that, or somebody exploring the ruins. They're not really doing archaeology. So that's a little. I enjoy those, and I'm going to revisit those. There's a Robert Silverberg one. Where is it here? Yeah, this year. Chris at Unlimited Reads reminded me this, but this won't be for the first week, but it's across a billion years. And I remember this, and as soon as he mentioned it, but I can't remember if that's really will fit in for the archaeology thing, but I will be reading this probably in week 2. But for week 1, I haven't received it yet. I'm waiting for it. I'm hoping I get it because the mail has been iffy here. There's industrial action sort of striking that's been happening, and I've missed the post a few times for getting things. I missed something on Thursday, but it should be here tomorrow on Monday, fingers crossed. And then I missed something on Saturday, but then I have to wait till this following Thursday to get it. So that's a bit disconcerting because when I've been doing redeliveries, there are issues and it just doesn't show up for the redelivery. So I have to call, wait however long, an hour on hold, and finally get through, and then have it sent. And it's no longer 2 days ahead. It's like 3 to almost a week at the moment because of the industrial action for that. But anyway, the short of that was that I'm expecting a couple books. Philip Jose Farmer, and it was thanks to Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, has he sort of again reminded me of things. And Farmer is somebody that I wanted to revisit. I don't think I've ever read everything by him, but I've read a good chunk of it. But he mentioned Flesh. It was, I think, Farmer's second book. And it was controversial, but also there's The Lovers, which may have been the 4th book. They're very controversial books, but very... well, they're not. I wouldn't say they're the best books and written, but they made an impact, and they helped veer science fiction into certain areas, I think. But anyway, I'll be reading Flesh for the first week because it's terrestrial, and then second week I will be reading, I think it is, The Lovers. So that's set in. And for archaeology, for the first week so far, I'm going to be reading Grotto of the Dancing Deer by Clifford Simak. And because this is Hal for the Holidays as well, I'm going to, and I'll get to more detail of that. I'm gonna start reading short stories, and I'm gonna read sort of from the beginning. And his first 2 short stories. One is called Foolproof, I think it is his first story. I'll be reading that off of a downloaded PDF of this 1942's Astounding magazine. And then I've got the second book, Impediment, 1942, in this here. So that is, but I want to supplement more. It'd be nice because Flesh is very, very short. It'd be nice to maybe add another novel, a short novel, to this if I can find something out of my piles here. Like I say, I might dabble into redoing a bunch of Simak stuff for this, just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it, I guess. Before I delve in next year for my big Simak project. But yeah, that's sort of week 1. Week 2, that's as far as I'm going to go a little bit at the moment. But like I say, it'll be week 2 will be The Lovers, and week 2 will also be Across a Billion Years by Robert Silverberg, and Extra-Terrestrial Archeology. This is the British edition because I think it was August. No, Anyway, sorry. It's just that this is the British edition of Astounding, 1957. This is June 1957, and it's got an H. Beam Piper story called Omnilingual. Omnilingual. Um, and it's a story. Well, it's archaeology on Mars, but it's got to do with linguistics and translating a language. And it took me a long time because I remembered an H. Beam Piper story that was archaeology. It was on Mars, but I couldn't remember anything else. It took me forever to sort of track this down, and then I dug through and when I found the date of it, I dug through my astoundings, but a lot of them are the British editions. So I had the wrong month, and I forget what month it was in the American one. But it could have been something like April or something like that. But it's in June here. It's with the same cover, but it's a different month because it's a truncated version of it. But anyway, I was really pleased to be able to realize that I had this, and it's in nice condition as well. So that's Stefan as well. That's a short story. And because it's extraterrestrial, I'm going to continue reading Hal Clement short stories. I'll see if I can add more in the first week, but I may not be able to because the way I'm going to be doing the Hal for the holidays is I'm going to be reading like it's over 3 months. So November and then December and January. I'm going to read in November sort of the first part of his career, like 40s to like up to say 40 to 60 novels and short stories. And I've got quite a few short stories in here, but also too I can mine PDFs for some short stories from the Astounding magazine, and then I'm going to read a couple books, novels, and they'll be from sort of the beginning of his career for November, at least two every month. In January, January though is I'd like to read 3 because it was sort of the last sort of big 3 books he did, and his very last book that posthumously, which I don't have, and I'm looking for a cheap copy. I might have to do it ebook. But there's Fossil, which is Isaac's Universe. It's a novel in a series called Isaac's Universe, which was a series put out, edited by Martin H. Greenberg, usually introductions by Isaac Asimov, but I don't think there's an introduction here. This is a novel, but there's 3 individual volumes called Isaac's Universe. They're a collection of stories in Isaac Asimov's universe. And Volume 2 and Volume 3 have, and it's the only place that's been published so far, is short stories by Hal Clement in Volume 2 and Volume 3. And I think there's another novel by Janet Asimov as well. And they're ones that I'm interested in because I'm really curious because of the Future History Project and stuff like this. And I don't think I had any of these sort of in there, so I don't know if there's any foundation stuff in there. And it might have been an omission by me, so I definitely want to get those. That's one of his last ones that I haven't read, and then Nitrogen Fix, which I haven't read either. And this is set on Earth, so I could potentially read it for week 1, but I'm not because, as I say, I want to read his last ones for Hal for the holiday, and then the very last book is called Noise that he published. So that's sort of thing. But again, I want to read like 2 or 3 books from the early part of his career for November, middle part 2 or 3 books, and then the end of his career in January. That's how I was trying to figure out how to do this. Like, should I chop and change? But that does mean that I think for the Mescaline series and maybe even Needle, that I'll be reading. I won't be reading those back to back. I'll be reading them in separate months, but that's not too bad, I don't think. But anyway, if anybody has any other suggestions, especially archaeology, real archaeology, the one thing that I do find There's a couple other things that have been suggested, and I'm going to look into these. But I do find that in books, and not just science fiction, that I've picked up in the past where it says, oh, this is archaeology, but it's dinosaurs and it's paleontology or very early man, which really isn't archaeology. What I want is an actual archaeologist excavating things. And there's a book also. What I'm going to get, it will be, and it's going to actually, it probably will be for week 2 as well, I think. Is a longer book. It's called The Forge of God, and I can't remember the author's name. I keep blanking on it, and I usually blank on the title as well. But it's a series of books, and it's got actual archaeology, and so I'm very, very interested in reading that. So I'm hoping, like, I'm making a TBR, I'm making plans, but and fingers crossed that my health will do it, because I'm going to make plans, and if it falls through, well, there's nothing I can do about it. But at least I've got a sort of structure for things if things go well. So fingers crossed. But yeah, if you've got any ideas for archaeology in science fiction, whether it be on Earth or in space, and even stuff like I do, even Hyperion, you could call it sort of archaeology, because you got the ruins, you got them that they're going to on the planet. And there's other little bits and pieces in there, because there's the tunnels and stuff like this. So, but there's no, like, there is an archaeologist on there, so that's even helps a little more. But or in the story, but a lot of times it's things like Gateway has been by Poul Anderson, Frederick Pohl. I think it's Frederick Pohl. Sorry, yeah. Which is a great series, the Heechee series, and I've never read them all, but I at least the last one or two. But I reread Gateway, which I really enjoyed, and it's like that's considered archaeology, because there's remains of an alien civilization in our solar system and outside of the solar system. And things like who goes there, or frozen hell, because there's an ancient spaceship. There's all sorts of things like that, which are interesting, but not quite archaeology, as I say, where there's ruins. But yeah, it is something that's interesting. But if there is lots of ruins in something, that might be interesting as well. And I'm really blanking, and I know I've read stuff in the past. I don't know if I had too many novels, but I remember short stories of things. I remember reading stuff, and for some reason, the Unilingual by H.B. Piper, I specifically remembered that, but I can't pull up anything else at the moment. And the interesting thing with the Unilingual is that I've got I've downloaded a little PDF of somebody's done a scholarly article on this short story, and I think the scholarly article is as long, if not longer, than the short story. So I'll be really fascinated to read that, because I think the PDF's like 45 pages long, and it's a novelette, so it might be a little longer. No, it's to be less. It's like 35 pages long. So the article about it is longer than the story, and that'll be fascinating to see, to read and report on. Anyway, I've taken up enough of your time, 25 minutes. Thank you very much, BookTube.